Hi. All right, what's question 1?
Question 1. Define taboo.
All right, what did you guys all find?
Like restricted by social custom or like not normal.
Good.
So again, like the weird thing.
Yeah. And then I think 2 and 3 were like examples, right? So I think number 2 is modern. What are some examples of taboo things nowadays? Stuff that like socially you're not supposed to talk about.
Picking your nose in public.
Good. Yes. Give me another one.
Asking a woman how old she is for some reason.
Yes, or her weight. God forbid. Never do that, right? What else?
Yeah.
Blasting your music on a speaker through the halls of school.
Good.
Some people do that.
Yeah.
And that kind of like, I don't know. Just put it in headphones.
We could probably come up with a whole bunch of like things freshmen should not do, right? Like there's all sorts of like taboo things in high school. But basically taboo means there's no law against it, but it makes people very uncomfortable. And it's just like you're breaking an unwritten rule of society. Talking about how much money people make can make people really uncomfortable, right? Women's menstrual cycles, like, oh my gosh, right? You're like stuff where you're just like, it's a little cringy. You just feel yourself like, ooh, gross. That's taboo. So what did you guys find about taboo things from Victorian society?
I said divorce.
Good, very good. Divorce. What else?
I said legs.
Okay, so honestly though, like, what would be the opposite of modesty? I don't know. Like showing, being overly sexual in any way. How you dress, how you act, anything with sex is very much taboo. Good.
Yeah, and what was considered revealing now is very different from then. Like how ankles and legs weren't a thing and then you like your collarbone wasn't showing. It was usually like turtlenecks and like hats.
100%. Good.
Miss Gavin,
Yep.
I found cruelty to animals for number 3.
Okay. I don't know a whole lot about
Okay.
that, but it could be.
Okay.
Yeah. But basically what I wanted you to think about is what is some unwritten stuff, because we're going to come back to that with something that happens in chapter 2. What is number 4?
Number 4 for chapter 2, find evidence that we should be wary of the employer.
Okay. What'd you guys find? It's right in the very beginning of chapter 2.
I said, there's a quote and it says, deal with him, but mind you, don't report not a word.
Yeah, right? Do you remember the context? Like, what is that talking about? Mariah, what do you remember?
Like, she's not supposed to contact him about anything, which is like, what the heck? You're supposed to be able to talk to your employer, especially when you're like the head
Yes.
of the thing.
Yes. So that is right in the very first paragraph of chapter 2. The uncle which is the employer, right? He had gotten a letter from Miles' headmaster. So it's basically like if Dr. News sent a letter home to your parents. And the uncle didn't even bother opening it, but he's like, oh my God, this guy's boring. You figure it out, but don't forget, don't report to me. That seems a little weird, right? If your parents got a letter from the principal about you, if your parent was just like, I don't even want to know what it was about, and like let your babysitter deal with it, that seems really sketchy. It's almost like he knows something is going on that's wrong and weird and is purposely distancing himself. Does that make sense?
Miss Gavin, for those questions where it's just like find evidence, do you want us to just put quotes or do you want us to like explain them a little?
A quote's fine.
Okay.
That works. I think, is the next one, number 5, have to do with she's not sleeping? Is that right?
Yeah.
Find evidence the governess is not sleeping.
That is in the same paragraph. Did you guys all find it?
Yeah.
Right?
No, I missed that one.
It's towards the end of that first paragraph. She talks about like she waited to read it until she went to bed, which that's kind of important. She sees a letter from the uncle and she like holds on to it and is like, I'm going to wait until I'm alone in my room and open it. Why might she be waiting until she's
Love
alone?
you too.
Why might she be waiting until she's alone at night to open the letter from the uncle?
Maybe because it's like scandalous or like private.
I think that's what she was hoping, right? She was hoping for a letter from him like, oh, he wrote to me. Oh, I'm going to tell him what a good job I'm doing. And then she opens it and it's just like, here's something for Miles' school. Deal with it. But right after that, she says, it gave me a second sleepless night. So it's like the second to the last sentence. It's 3 lines from the bottom of that paragraph. So once again, she is not sleeping when she's at Bly. So that matters. Okay? Everybody good so far? Cool. All right, what are we on? Number 6?
Number 6, find evidence that the governess jumps to conclusions.
I think we could talk about the same thing, where like how she thought that the letter was going to be scandalous. That's a good example.
Yep, absolutely. Anyone find anything else?
She, on page 12, she talks about the other governess, and she, like, jumps to the conclusion, like, oh, did she die before, like, Miss Gross had even said anything, really? And then, like, later Miss Gross said she had, but, like, the first thing she said was, like, did she die here or something?
Well, kind of. So we know that she died because the uncle had told her that in her initial interview. So jumping to the conclusions about, like, assuming she died, I wouldn't say that that's a jump. But the fact that she's like, oh, did she die here is a little weird. Like, why would you assume that she would die on the property? Like, that seems a little strange, but so that could work. What else?
There's a part in their conversation where she just like she keeps interrupting, and so like that's kind of what I took as jumping to conclusions.
Okay.
Because it should like there's like the dash where Miss Gross was cut off and stuff like that.
Yes, good notice. She does that all the time with Mrs. Gross, where Mrs. Gross will start talking and it's like the governess finishes the thought because she just assumes she knows what Mrs. Gross was thinking. So that's good. On the very first page for me, she assumes that Mrs. Gross can't read. When she reads the letter, if you notice too, all it says is Miles can't come back. The headmaster doesn't give any explanation for why Miles can't go back to school, which is a little weird, right? And right away, the governess is like, oh, that can only have one meaning. Well, wouldn't you think there would be a bunch of reasons a kid could get expelled? Like, how do you know if there's no evidence at all? And you haven't even met the kid. So, like, how would you know what he did wrong, right? So there's just a whole bunch of places where we see her jumping to conclusions. All you need is one for that question, but we're just kind of starting to get used to her character. All right, what are we on now? 8?
Well, 7 was why does the headmaster mention what Miles did? The fact that it is not mentioned means his action or actions must be condemned by Victorian society and taboo against speaking of them. Make a prediction. So how you mentioned it a little bit, but if you wanted to add anything else.
Yeah, so this is just you predicting as long as your answer is something that is taboo, that makes people uncomfortable. So let's hear a couple examples of what you guys are thinking. Why might Miles have been kicked out of school?
I said maybe like he did something sexual to someone without consent, so maybe like touching someone, raping someone, something like that.
I was thinking something like that too, but I was also like, this is a kid, so I didn't quite know. I was kind of like, I didn't know if this was a stretch, but also if he's like a psychopath or anything, like, I don't know.
Yeah, but a lot of times like kids, they don't know that they do something. Well, he has a pattern, so he might know, but a lot of times, like, kids will accidentally, like, touch another kid, and then, like, the other kid will, like, kind of know it's wrong, so they'll be uncomfortable with it, but they don't tell someone. So, like, it's definitely possible, and especially, like, I don't know, I feel like he could know what it is because of his patterns.
Okay.
Maybe he did something really creepy that has to do with all the weird stuff going on at Bly, like, you know, said some weird stuff and everyone is freaked out. I don't know.
That could be. Could be.
I'm assuming it might have had to do with something of like his repeated actions. It's like he had a if he's getting, instead of like, he's like expelled, he's not allowed back. It wouldn't just be one event. It would have to be reoccurring things. It doesn't have to be the same thing. Like maybe he's quick to anger, but then also he like sometimes has outbursts. And then at one point he killed a squirrel and they're like, you're creepy.
Yeah.
I tried to think of weird things. And I said one of them was he could have stripped naked and streaked through the classes.
Good. Because like just violence by itself wouldn't be taboo, right? Like especially someone who's working in a school, and like it's going to be an all boys boarding school. You know there's going to be fights at some point. Like it's a bunch of kids living there. There's going to be arguments. There's going to be possible physical fights. That wouldn't be taboo yet. That would be more normal. So you've got to push whatever your prediction is to something that's uncomfortable to write down. So if you were like, he stripped naked, that would be very uncomfortable in Victorian society. Absolutely. Torturing a squirrel. Yep, that would be something that you wouldn't want to write down. So whatever you guys predict, what Ellen said about maybe it has to do with like the weird stuff going on at Bly, where it's like, we don't even know what it is yet. So it would be hard to write down, right? But it's weird, it's other, it's something creepy. Whatever you put down, make sure it fits that definition of taboo. Okay? Does everyone feel like they have something they can put down for that one? Awesome. Cool. What's next?
All right, now we're on chapter 3 with question 8.
Okay.
Cite or highlight diction, cite and highlight diction that shows an obsession with the physical and the beautiful. Circle diction that is heavenly.
So you can find a whole bunch in that very first paragraph of chapter 3, whatever page that is for you. Will you guys read me some phrases that you found?
He was incredibly beautiful. He stood wistfully looking.
I said great glow of freshness, or the same positive fragrance of purity.
Good. So purity, good. What about heavenly? Pure could kind of work. Anything else for heavenly?
There's a sentence that says, what I then and there took him to my heart, for it was something divine.
Good.
Yes. Divine part is what I circled.
Yes, divine. Good. And all of that comes from that first paragraph, so you guys should all be able to find a few things. List a couple for that one, okay? Make sure you have beautiful and make sure you have heavenly. So make sure you have both for that.
I had a question about number 8, the one we were just on. So are we looking for examples of like the difference between physical beauty and like the beauty in your head and like what she was thinking, or were you looking at like what she finds physically beautiful and describing it?
Just basically for her describing the kids as beautiful and heavenly.
And talking specifically about what they look like, their physical forms, not like their personality or anything.
Because we're setting up, she is assuming because they are both so pretty that they could never do anything wrong, right? Like, she finds out Miles got kicked out of school. If you were someone's governess, which is like more than a babysitter, and you find out the kid that you're watching got expelled before you even met him, wouldn't you be a little like, oh, this kid's going to be trouble? But she sees him and is like, oh, there's no way he could have done anything wrong. He's too pretty. Just because you're pretty doesn't mean that you behave well. And so we kind of see her making these assumptions again.
Now, is that kind of like mentality like common in Victorian era? Like very, or is this kind of, is she still kind of flighty and like weird?
Both. So, the whole concept of like good versus evil at the time, people thought about it in much more black and white than we do today. But this girl is very, very prone to fancy and romanticizing things. Did you guys hear Bia in the background?
That's what that was.
Yeah. She started using her squeaky toy and she howls along with it. So if all of a sudden that happens, like, sorry. But our young governess, she's 20, which isn't super young for Victorian times, but she's lived such a sheltered life that she's a little more immature than normal. So that matters. That was 8. What's number 9?
Number 9. In the first paragraph, the governess says Miles has an indescribable little air of knowing nothing in the world but love. Highlight this line. How do we know this is not true?
Okay. So what are some bad things that we know Miles has experienced that would mean, oh, he's known a few things besides love?
Doesn't he, like, so it's the uncle, the kid's uncle that's, like, right, so he doesn't have parents.
Good. Well, okay, his parents died, right? Like, yeah. His parents died. Excellent. And how does the uncle treat him?
Dismissively. He, like, doesn't even seem to show up or care. He hires random women
Good.
to care for him.
Good. And?
Got kicked out of school.
Yeah.
So I doubt that was good.
Good. Excellent. And? What happened to his last governess?
He died.
Right? So, like, there's been a lot of negative stuff. Like, all of that we've learned in 2 chapters. So he's known something besides love before. So, again, she just assumes he's perfect because he's pretty. Don't do that. You guys remember that when you all date, too. Just because they're pretty doesn't mean they're good. What's next?
Oh, this is a good one. Number 10. Interpret the scene where the governess and Mrs. Gross kiss.
Okay, so in my book, that is on page 14. I don't know what page it's on in the PDF. Does anybody know what page it's on in the PDF?
It's on 24.
Okay, cool. So it's really quick. It's basically right after the governess is like, am I going to write back to the headmaster? No. Am I going to write to the uncle? No. Am I going to say anything to the boy himself? No. About the fact that he got kicked out of school. Which is a little bit weird, right? Like, she's not addressing the fact that he got expelled with anyone. And Mrs. Gross is so excited that they kiss. Thoughts?
Like, the way I took it wasn't in a romantic way. For me, it was more like a familiar, like a family sister kind of case.
Okay, good. And it does say they embraced like sisters, so there's that. Good.
And this is something that, like, now us thinking about it, it's like sisters don't really kiss, but like back then, I'm sure it was different. It was much more intimate with people that you were close with, and like so they didn't think of it in like a romantic way, how like Mariah was saying.
Good.
Yeah, but it also depends like on the culture too. We don't know really much about their culture. Even like now, certain religion or certain cultures still like openly kiss when they meet people, even if they don't even know them.
Mm-hmm.
What does this mean about like, I don't want to say how close they are. How are those two getting along?
Well.
Okay, someone besides Mariah and KT, tell me a little bit about how you interpret like the governess and Mrs. Gross.
I kind of thought like at first there was some sort of like tension just because Mrs. Gross was like, well, you're just like another person who comes through and like you're just another governess, like there'll be more after you, there were more before you. But I feel like it's now sort of like she's starting to like get along with her better and stuff. Yeah.
I thought they were kind of fake around each other, to be honest. You know, like Mrs. Gross is like all kinds of fake nice to her at the beginning, but it kind of makes her feel uneasy. But I don't know.
Who initiated the kiss?
Mrs. Gross.
Good, right? So I agree with everything you all have said so far. their relationship is up and down throughout the whole story. It's tense at one point. They seem really close and on the same team kind of together. She's the only one that the governess confided in about Miles being expelled. Now Mrs. Gross is making the initiation of like, do you mind if I'm so forward and like in the embrace?
I took it as they both initiated it, though.
Yeah, because, like, Mrs. Gross asks, and then the governess is the one who actually, like, takes Mrs. Gross in her arms.
Yeah, and also it's, like, Mrs. Gross, like, is, like, starting it. She's like, would you mind, miss, if I use the freedom? And then it cuts off, and then the governess picks up. To kiss me? No, of course I don't mind. So they were very much, seemed that they were very, like, gung-ho about it.
Yes. Now, this matters for a couple reasons. The two of them are going to continue to stay close for a while and confide in each other about the children. You have to kind of make your determination of how honest their friendship is. So this story is written purposely ambiguously so that you could believe that they are really close and that they're good friends and they're working together the whole time. There's also evidence that Mrs. Gross is kind of shady. So you can look back, and then there's evidence that our governess is a little bit shady. So as you continue to see the two of them interact, pay close attention and think about, like, are they actually on the same page, or is the governess misinterpreting things where she thinks they're closer than they really are? Is Mrs. Gross manipulating her? You're going to have to make your own judgments about that. And as long as you have reason for your judgment, there is evidence for a whole bunch of different things. Okay? So that's why I had you look at that scene. Good. What's next?
Number 11, still in chapter 3, find evidence of the other.
Ah.
I said in the very first paragraph when Miles was described as heavenly.
Okay, good. It's like he's too good to be true. Good. Mm-hmm. So that's different. What else?
Also, the fact that he just, like, got kicked out of his school, which is, like, kind of not, I guess, unusual. So it's like he's different from most boys and that he had to be kicked out.
And something I think that was mentioned before, he was actually really young to be sent away to school. So he's probably younger than all of his peers. So usually you would think that the younger kid would get in maybe less trouble because they would have been intimidated by the older kids. But the fact that he did something so bad to get kicked out and not the older boys is a little weird. Good. What more obvious other happens at the very end of chapter 3?
She was going on her walk that she does like every night during her hour, and she's talking about like envisioning or like meeting someone or something, and then all of a sudden there's a guy in the tower that was just like staring at her like the whole time that he moved around too.
Yeah.
That's like page 15.
Yeah. All right. It is supposed to be basically a household of women. She runs it. There's servants and stuff. There might be some male servants. But there wouldn't be very many. I mean, it might be like the driver kind of thing, but it would mainly be a household full of women. And all of a sudden she sees a man on the tower of the house. That's definitely other, okay? Very, very weird and creepy. Because she's like...
I assumed that was the uncle, though.
No. Because she was hoping it was the uncle. And then as she stares, she says... I'm sure I had not seen it in Harley Street, which means it would like I had not seen it anywhere. I have not seen this man anywhere, so it's not the uncle. She was hoping it was at first. So it's basically the way she describes it, it's some stranger. It's someone she's never seen before, which is how I think it's fair to say like it's definitely no other servant or anything like that. So a stranger shows up on the tower of the house, which is definitely really creepy. All right. I don't remember if let's talk about this creepy man for a little bit because I think this matters. So Tori was right on, and I think this is a question I might be skipping ahead. It's important that you recognize that right before she sees the strange man on top of the house, she was daydreaming about the uncle. She was hoping like, oh, maybe he's going to show up and he'll see what a good job I'm doing and he'll be so proud of me and then we'll fall in love. Like, she doesn't say that, but it's kind of implied. She's absolutely daydreaming. She's in this romantic country estate and she's hoping to run across a man. So we definitely know that she's like thinking romantic feelings. As she's daydreaming about a man, all of a sudden she sees a man. How do you all take that? Is he there? Is he a ghost? Is he real? Is it all like a fantasy? Is it actually something like a stranger that she needs to be afraid of? Like, because he's coming after them? Like, what are your thoughts? How do you interpret this man that appears on top of the house?
Right now, I'm thinking it's more of her daydreaming because she was thinking about it and then it like popped up, versus when like if it was a ghost, she wouldn't be like, it wouldn't have popped up right after she thought about it.
Okay.
I think I need to reread that part because I don't quite like remember a lot of details about it. But my thing is, does she describe him as like, based on how she describes him, we can relate it to how much she's daydreaming and like imagining him. Because if she describes him as like this beautiful like man and she was really interested and intrigued in him, then it seems to go more along with her daydreaming because she was dreaming about something happy and about being intrigued into a man. Now we're like seeing this other like figure. But if it was a switch, if we go from like the daydreaming happily to like this like it's like the drop and then we see this extreme negative energy coming from this mysterious figure, that means something entirely different. And it could be like made like reality like waking her up. So I don't quite remember the tone of that one. I think I just might have zoned it out.
Let's take a look. So before we look that, couple things that matter too. What time of day does she see the man on top of the house?
Isn't it night or like the end of the day?
Yep. It's as the sun is going down. It says as the light is fading. It's after she puts the kids to bed. This is after some amount of time that she's been there. So we don't know how long it's been, but it's been really peaceful and wonderful. Which could mean a couple things though. So if she's been going about day to day just with kids, like think about your lives right now while you're stuck at home. Is she interacting with many adults right now? No, she's not interacting with many people at all. Kind of like us all in quarantine. So she's bored, right? There's Mrs. Gross that she can talk to, but they're very different, right? Our governess would be considered like white collar. And not upper class by any means, but she has the most power. Mrs. Gross is a servant. So like they're not supposed to be really good friends, right? This is Victorian times. Like there's a difference of class and status. So she doesn't have anyone on her level besides 2 kids, which that's different. So she's bored. She's not seeing anyone. Amount of time has gone by. She's daydreaming about the master. She's a young single woman who's kind of at marrying age. Either she's going to marry soon or she's going to be an old maid. And then all of a sudden she sees this man at night. So it's like, how closely can she see? All right. There are 2 paragraphs at the very end. For me, this is on page 16. The first paragraph starts with "it produced in me." Do you guys all see that? Mm-hmm. All right. I'm going to read you through it and just kind of talk you through what this all means. So if you want to like annotate in your books or jot some stuff down, a few phrases should stand out. It produced in me this figure in the clear twilight. I remember 2 distinct gasps of emotion, which were sharply the shock of my first and that of my second surprise. So initially she's shocked and surprised. Okay, so far we can't tell if it's good or bad, right? But then she says, my second was a violent perception of the mistake of my first, The man who met my eyes was not the person I had precipitately supposed. So she figures out, like, oh crap, it's not the uncle. There came to me thus a bewilderment of vision, of which after these years there is no living view that I can hope to give. So she's like, I can't even explain to you what I saw. An unknown man in a lonely place is a permitted object of fear to a young woman privately bred. How do you all interpret that phrase? An unknown man in a lonely place is a permitted object of fear to a young woman privately bred.
I think of that as like walking, like I'm trying to imagine like myself, like I don't go out at night. As a woman, I'm afraid.
Mm-hmm.
And like in that kind of sense where it's like she's alone. And even though there's that distance, she still is very much like there's another guy. I don't know. And also,
I feel like,
sorry.
I just feel like men and women, like, being alone is not really that, maybe, like, acceptable at that time. Like, so it's, like, a scary thing to think about being alone with the man.
More taboo.
Yeah, right? Also, it's like she's creating drama for herself a little bit. Like, if I tell anyone I saw a strange man while out on my walk, they're all going to freak out with me because this is something that, like, I'm allowed to be afraid of. So she's like, I'm bored, I'm hanging out with kids. A strange man! She could turn this into a huge thing to talk about for days and days and days. So it's like, oh, me, I'm a woman privately bred, like, I have such good breeding and I'm such a good lady. I'm allowed to freak out about a limited number of things because I need to be behaving like a lady, right? This is one thing I'm allowed to freak out about. So it's like, how can I make this dramatic and exciting? The rest of the...
Are we to assume that this is fantasy a little bit? Because for a minute, I thought it was like, how I was saying she was in her daydream and she was like happy, and then the shock. So when she said the violent, like she described it as violent, being shocked out of her daydream to see this man. But now she's taking it as like this greater thing. She's starting to be afraid and then like get in her head about it.
Yep.
So it is fantasy. So maybe the man really is there in reality, but she is over exaggerating his intent or the vibe of him.
Could be. I think it matters that she is someone who is prone to exaggeration, right? We've kind of proven that with a bunch of stuff. Although if it's real, you're allowed to freak out about a man who shows up on the roof of your house, right? So I think there are, maybe 3. So he could be real and it could actually be scary. It could be all made up in her head because she's bored and she hasn't been sleeping and it's dark. So it's like, what can you really see? So maybe she's imagining some stuff. It also could be a ghost. This book was sold as a ghost story. So there's a possibility that like she's being haunted by someone, which it'll get into that a little bit in later chapters. So it's like, you kind of have to decide your opinion on this. Do you trust her? Do you think he's really there? Then is he a human or is he a ghost? Or do you think, she's crazy. She made it all up. She's bored. So you get to decide how you feel about that. And there's not a wrong answer. So it's kind of nice. Other couple things at the bottom of page 16. So the last paragraph, there are 2 ways that she describes him that matter. One is she makes sure that she says he is wearing no hat. It's like 5 lines from the bottom of 16 in like the book version. She says, I remember in the sight of familiarity of his wearing no hat. What does it mean if a man's not wearing a hat in Victorian times?
He's pretty confident in his hairdo.
No.
He's at home?
Well, he's outside right now, right? Because he's on top of the house. So, which I figured maybe, any guesses?
Well, I liked what, was it Timothy?
Mm-hmm.
That said, like, I don't know, because I liked that because he's implying that he's more relaxed. You get home, you take off your hat. So, yeah, maybe he's on the roof, but if he lives there, he didn't plan to go outside and be seen. I mean, I wouldn't go and stand on my roof at night hoping somebody will see me.
Okay, that could be a thing. Actually, I hadn't thought about that, so good call. Another big deal, though, is that there's this big thing with like class structure in this book, where if you are upper class of any sort, there's certain things that you have to do to be proper, and you always cover your head when you go outside. So it's the lower class that wouldn't do that. So the fact that he's not wearing a hat could mean that he's lower class and that she's being a little judgy right now when she sees him. So that could be a thing. The other thing is on the top of page 17. She also describes him. The first sentence says, he was in one of the angles, the one away from the house, very erect, as it struck me, with both hands on the ledge. One other interpretation of this book is that she has no outlet for her sexuality. One is that it's Victorian England, and as a woman especially, you're not supposed to be a sexual creature, right? But the second thing is that, like, it's still human nature. She's a 20-year-old, and she has no men to even flirt with or anything. And so she starts and she was having a romantic thought, so she's turning her romantic thought into this taboo romantic thought. How exciting would it be if a strange man came and, like, kidnapped me and took me away, right? Which, like, you're not supposed to think like that. But we know people have those thoughts, right? We know people get excited about forbidden fantasies and stuff like that. Okay, so if you look at the language with how she describes him, a lot of times there's that Freudian kind of sexual imagery. So that's one interpretation too. So keep that in mind.
Did you say Freudian? Like,
yeah, Freud likes looking at like how things are described and looking for like phallic description versus.
Because I remember studying him, and I thought he was more about like he did like children's interest in like sexuality and things, and then how it impresses them as an adult, specifically relation to the people around them, like their family. He did a
bunch of things. He talks about children, as they go through developmental stages, and you get stuck in a stage and that affects you later on. He was also big on like unconscious desires that we're not aware that we have and how they affect us. So if we interpret her as having this like unconscious like lust for someone, she might be inventing this forbidden man. Maybe or maybe not. All right.
Not specifically the children's impressions.
Yes. All right. We did 8. What's number 9? Did we do 9?
We got all the way to 11 and I think we briefly started touching 12 and 13, but we'll still.
Okay. What is number 12?
So there is a little part about self-fulfilling prophecies, and then we go to 12 and 13. 12 is read page 12, or in the PDF it's 21. The conversation about him. Discuss the possibility that the previous governess was pregnant.
Okay. So find this part. Him is italicized. Does everybody know where that is in your books? Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to start with, they're talking about the last governess. There's a paragraph that starts with but. It's towards the top of page 12. But the next day, as the hour for my drive approached, I cropped up in another place. What was the lady who was here before? The last governess? She was also young and pretty, almost as young and almost as pretty, miss, even as you. Ah, then, I hope her youth and beauty helped her, I recollect throwing off. He does seem to like us young and pretty. Oh, he did, Mrs. Gross assented. It was the way he liked everyone. She had no sooner spoken, indeed, than she caught herself up. I mean, that's his way. The master's. Now, something you should notice is she started off talking past tense, right? Then she switches to present tense. That is his way, the master's. I was struck, but of whom did you speak first? She looked blank. Why, of him. The master? Who else? Doesn't it seem like there's some other man that's not being mentioned? Do you guys get that? How it seems like Mrs. Gross was talking about someone else at first? The fact that she switches from past tense and then switches to present tense kind of seems like she's trying, like she accidentally made a mistake. At first she was talking about someone else and then she tried to cover it up. Now this actually happened before our governess saw the strange man on the tower. So that could be a reason too, that she's like, oh, there's some man that Mrs. Gross is trying to hide, right? So it seems a little bit weird. If this is some stranger or if this is the uncle, either way, in the context of some man likes the governesses really pretty, what could that mean about what happened to the other governess? What might she have died of?
Failed pregnancy.
What do you think would happen if a governess got pregnant at this time? Like, what would they do with her?
Burn her.
What would a young single woman who got pregnant do?
Oh wait, wouldn't she be shunned? Like
Okay.
they'd like, because I remember in like the Scarlet Letter, which is like a different time, but like they didn't kill her or anything, but they were very much like they marked her and then shunned her.
Yeah, so it's not like she's going to just have the kid and everything's going to be fine. So how might she have died?
She could have been lynched.
Maybe. Okay, did she die at...
Lynching was a thing back then.
Yeah. Did she die at Bly? No, right? It says she went away. And then all of a sudden we find out she died. So she went away. Where might she have gone?
A field to die.
Could she have gotten an abortion
Okay.
and like it failed?
Could have been
Oh.
could have been a botched abortion. Like, let's go send you off to the institution or to where, I don't know where they would do abortions back in the day. I'm sure it was not legal, right? So it's going to be some shady back alley deal, not actually literally an alley. But so it could have been a botched abortion because that was definitely taboo, right? So it could have been the abortion, or she could have gone home to try to like give birth at home, and then they would hush that up and be like, oh, this is her sister, or, you know, her new brother. But she might have died during pregnancy. But
So we can assume that she died relating to like the child, and also the child isn't alive.
I think so, because in the prologue where they make all the jokes about, and what did she die of? So much respectability. It's hinted that it's going to be something scandalous, right? And then the fact that she got sent away for a little bit and then dies, like, there are very few things that could have happened that we would have needed to send her away for. So a major interpretation is like, this last governess got pregnant. We know the uncle is kind of creepy and into hiring young, pretty girls who are kind of naive, right? Or possibly there's this other unidentified man who liked everyone. Oh, he did, Mrs. Gross assented. It was the way he liked everyone. So there's another man who might be into these young, pretty governesses. Either way, it sounds like there's two possible creepy dudes who could have been going after these young, pretty governesses. Does that make sense? Everybody good? And then the very last one, what's 13?
13. Read page 15 to the end. That would be page 25 and to 29 in the PDF. The first part is in the first weeks. So it starts. Discuss the possibility of self-fulfilling prophecies. What is she thinking about right before she's seeing the figure in the tower? Who or what was the figure in the tower? And do we trust the narrator? Find evidence. We talked about that.
So we already talked about that. That is where you guys decide, what do you think about the figure on the tower? Was he really there and is he a stranger? Did she make him up because she was fantasizing about the uncle? Is he a ghost that's haunting her? Is it this other strange unidentified man, this him that Mrs. Gross had been talking about, that is like somehow hidden in Bly? Like, you guys make your claim, but just support it with some text evidence. Okay, so whatever you think it was, like, pull a quote and explain it. Cool?
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other questions? You guys doing okay?
Yep.
Cool.
All right.